Ja, herzlich willkommen zurück, wieder von mir aus dem Homeoffice Homeland hier in Hamburg. Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir jetzt den ersten Talk haben und ich werde jetzt die Sprache wechseln. This talk is going to be in English. I'm really happy that you three are here with us now again, Jan, Stefanie and Trisha. Thank you very much for the lectures of your letters, and I'm really happy that we get the chance to talk now to each other. Maybe since the movie we saw was the letters you wrote, or in the names Juan and Stella, but in German. So in my moderation, I already said a bit about my interpretation of your letters, but maybe we could start with that you explain shortly in some few sentences to Trisha what your letters were about. What was that?
You want to start, Jan, or?
Oh, you start with the letters.
Okay, well, yeah, the letters, well, at least my part of the letters were also a part of my recent published novel. It's called No Part of the World. This is the very open translation. In German, it's Kein Teil der Welt. And it was only small episodes within the novel, and it deals with a fictional world called Karagüzon. It's an island there, and there was like sort of an ecological catastrophe, and it is covered with salt. And I in the letters I take the perspective of an ethnographer who visits the islands and writes letters to Juan, my friend, my lover, my partner, and for me, these little episodes were a way of trying to capture a emotional landscape. Actually, once I dreamt of them, of these islands, and I saw pictures of them, and then I put it into the novel, and until the very end, actually, until now, I don't know why they are there, but they fit quite well, I guess. And I thought it might be interesting to broaden up this in a letter conversation. And Jan and me, we talked about it, and yeah, we did it.
Yeah, and Jericho, so this hometown I mentioned in the letters, is a fictional town as well. It's the main place of my first novel, Against the World, which is also set in Jericho, and it has obviously some allusions to, you know, the oldest city of the world, Jericho, and also to a kind of East German real existing city called Jericho with a W at the end. And this Jericho is located in Western Germany, near the Dutch border, a very small town. And my letters are about the strangeness of being there and you know, visiting my parents and friends from school and stuff like that, and be at home in Berlin at the same time. So it's a kind of always living in the difference between my hometown and my chosen town, my chosen life and my former life, and it's always like living in two places at once. And I'm always trying to figure out what this means to me and how it shapes myself, and I'm trying to explain it to Stella, because I want her to know me better.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And also thank you for accommodating my inability to speak German. With English being the hegemonic language, I apologize, but also very appreciative. But I, you know, I was lucky enough to look at a translation of these letters beforehand, and you know, the epistolary address is so fascinating to me, because even though I don't necessarily write in letters, I feel like my work always has an address, because I like to think about talking to other people as a mode of weird fantasy. Like when you write letters, and the letter, by the time the letter gets to the person who's receiving it, you're already a different person. You're like in a different space than you were than when you were writing those letters. So there's this kind of like strange haunting. And now knowing that, you know, some of the landscapes in your texts are imaginary, and thinking about the ways in which the way we relate to each other enables those fantasies is really exciting to me and very beautiful.
Especially now in the times of the pandemic. I don't know how it is in the US, but the mail, it takes such a long time until it arrives, even though we don't send personal letters that much. But I found it quite interesting what you say. Once you write the letter, this is the moment, and also the person you were, once you were writing the letter is already kind of disappearing. And yeah, I found that. And it's also like everything in fiction is, I mean, I'm a fictional writer mainly, and I also like to build up abundant worlds, like sometimes maybe even overdressed, but then my editor cuts it down and keeps the best part in it. And she always says, yeah, you need the overdressing to build up the what is important in the middle, and then I do the cutting. And and fiction in general, I think, is something that is very it because it is not true, of course, and you don't have any proof in the reality for it. It is something that disappears and is like and that makes it so fascinating for me. And so somehow I can grasp it, even I can grasp it easily, even though it is something that disappears so quickly. It's very paradoxical, but this is how it feels to me.
I think
Yeah.
this is also.
Oh no, can I just ask?
Yeah,
let me just ask really quickly. So
Sorry.
these were actual letters, right? Sent through the mail and not through email, because I wasn't sure.
No, we send it via email.
Okay.
Ah.
Yeah. No, we didn't. I didn't put the salt on it. And sand. You remember when you were writing to your friends in mail or something? When I was in Spain, I always put some sand for my friends in the letters in the 90s. No, we did it in a modern way.
Yeah.
But you started the first letter, and then the other person answered again, and it was like a real letter conversation.
Yes.
I think it was really interesting, Jan, what you said, that you feel like you have two homes, and you have also two homes like in different times. So you have like the old home, Ostfriesland. It's a northern region in Germany. I don't know, is there an English name for it? East Friesland? I don't know. Maybe. So, and I think, Trisha, this is a bit what you were talking about before too, no? When you were talking about also the experience of diaspora and how maybe build up a nostalgic homeland. So I would be interested to hear more about your thoughts on these ideas of homes, but also in different times.
Mhm.
Yeah, as you mentioned it, but I think it's like more than two homes, but it's like four homes. Like it's not only the geographical place, but it's also the time. So I have like two homes in East Frisia, like the current home, and also my childhood and my youth. And I have two homes in Berlin as well, like, you know, my present time here, and you know, about, you know, my memory about the days when I moved here and why I moved here. So these are kind of the four homes I'm dealing with. And listening to Trisha's essay or keynote about nostalgia, I have to say that for me, nostalgia is like, you know, like a disease, really. It's like impossible for me to go back to one of these older places, these former places, and it's always like the, you know, the longing to go back there. But on the other hand, I know that it's something impossible or bad, you know, even for myself. And I was suffering from this impossibility for such a long time. Yeah, and I think my way of dealing is you know, to write about it, but not in a nostalgic way. You know, it's like my first novel is about my childhood and youth in East Frisia, but it's not a kind of idyllic place. The opposite is true. It's like a hell. it's like a really bad place, and it's like a sign for myself, you know, saying, don't try to go back there. It's bad for you, and you changed as well. It's not only, you know, it's not only the society changed or, you know, the landscape changed, but you changed as well. It's not good for you to go back there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really identify with that, actually. You know, something that I thought a lot about in the kind of style of writing that the keynote was in, and that I developed in my last book, this sense of I'm here in different times and places, but everything is in the present tense, is because I think that there is a sense when people write about their lives that they think that it's a linear narrative, right? Like this happened and then this happened and then this happened, and it's a progression. Whereas I really like writing in a way that accepts the kinds of intrusions that you're describing, of like nostalgia intruding in a way that kind of like holds you back or pulls you back, or is aberrant, or is sort of like threatening or wrong to you. Because I think that rejecting those things means that you never deal with them, right? And also, like, that's just like part of our experience of life. And one thing that I really enjoyed about the video that you guys showed alongside your letters is that there's all of these different landscapes that are empty, and each one had a different kind of mood, right? Like each one kind of shifted me both temporally and psychically in like different flashes. And I think that aesthetic or sensibility is something that I think a lot about in relation to the multiplicity of homelands, shall we say, like the ways that we're shifted in really minute ways based on differences in location and differences in time. And I really do agree with you that nostalgia is a really difficult thing to reckon with, right? Even if things are so bad for me, like I have a lot of nostalgia for not just being a teenager, but for the misery of my teenage years, which is terrible. I mean, I'm a much better person now, and yet I have this attachment because it formed me. And I was really interested in this last moment of your letters where you talk about, you know, what if we lost all of our memories? What would we be like then? And is there something that we would lose, or would that make us better? Like, would it open us up to more possibilities because we're not held back by these attachments, right? That's something that I certainly fantasize about a lot.
I think it's really interesting, Jan, that you said it's also for yourself like a reminder to not go back. So did you ever think about going back?
In time?
No, not in time, but to East Frisia. Yeah, in time would be amazing too.
You mean about, you know, like moving back to East Frisia?
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know, that's a kind of very kind of concrete question, because my last book was about my personal homelessness somehow, you know, my inability to find a new home in Berlin because the rents are so high that it's almost impossible for a freelancer to find a new apartment, an affordable apartment. And on the other hand, I was thinking about moving back to East Frisia because of these reasons. And you know, sometimes it's for me like the reason why I moved to Berlin in the late 90s was that the rents were so low, and that, you know, you could rent a really huge flat here and a huge apartment. You can live like a king somehow, you know, and that and everyone came here because there was so much empty space, and everyone, especially the artists, could do whatever they wanted to do. And now this whole world is shrinking, you know, year by year somehow. So and it's getting more expensive, and that's why artists, writers, poets like leave the city somehow, or kind of stop writing, stop doing art, and instead of, you know, working for money. And so I think it's like a really kind of concrete question to and an alternative to move back, or to not to move back to the to East Frisia, but to move to the countryside. But then you have to think about, what is the city? You know, what does it mean to live in a city? And I think cities, especially big cities, are always kind of the the motor, the energy of, you know, social change. And here, you in such a city like Berlin, you are in a center of social change. You take part in it because of the university, of the young people and the new ideas. And as soon as you move back to a kind of smaller place, especially a village, you are somehow disconnected from this energy and from this movement.
And do you think, so I remember in the last year I saw several documentaries about people who actually Germany moved back to the countryside, especially also because of the corona situation, because with lockdown they saw how much is possible to work remote, to have like cultural events like this remote. So do you think with this technologies, with this development, there could be also a change in what we define as home? The internet allows us to have like the cultural home online and then have a home on the countryside.
Yeah, maybe, but I think that's the whole digital world is somehow exaggerated in a sense that you really do change the society. But I think it's like, I think if it feels like somehow not like home, you know, it's like, especially if you think about this pandemic, I really kind of, I have a longing for like closeness and for, you know, being touched or touch other people and stuff like that. Not in a creepy way, you know, it's like, but in a way of, you know,
and to like, yeah,
what?
to hug people.
Yeah, to hug people and, you know, I think these conversations we're you know having right now, for instance, are different from those we would have when we would sit next to each other. The
Other
quality.
people's breath, like all these signs of all these vital signs that you normally don't recognize. You're not conscious about it. Like people breathing, people sweating, people being nervous. These are all the things that they don't happen in the cyberspace. But going back to the countryside, and talking about nostalgia, I think I don't think this is, but this is at least my opinion, that this is a modern move to go to the countryside. I think it shows, it is a proof of how people go back, and it's a move to it's a regressional move. And I'm not surprised that this is happening in the times of a crisis, of a health crisis, ecological crisis, however you call the corona pandemic. People tend to try to secure themselves, and somehow they feel secure in the countryside. It also has a lot to do with the media, I think, who are advertising the green landscape of the countryside that actually doesn't exist there. We have more nightingales in Berlin than in Brandenburg. This is very, very interesting that for example, the ecological diversity, not talking about the cultural and human diversity in the countryside, at least in Germany, is way smaller than in the cities. And for example, in Berlin, when I go to the park every morning, I see 2 foxes lying on the grass and taking sunbaths and stuff like that. And I don't know, but at least for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable there. I would even feel way more strange there than in Berlin or in another big city, where I have the feeling I'm gathering with people who feel like myself, who feel somehow foreign in the world. And between the bubbles, I don't mean it in a negative way. It's like the space between the bubbles that are like stick together in a bathtub when you put like some foam in it. This is the space where I have the feeling I am at home.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I agree with you, Steffi, about, you know, the pastoral space, or the kind of like fantasy of the countryside being weirdly regressive and kind of separatist. I mean, I'm also a writer who feels like I need social connections in order to do both my cultural and political work, right? I have a friend who moved to the French countryside, and she lives in a cottage, and it works for her. Yeah, it works for her, but I'm always like, don't you feel like it's a little bit like you're ignoring everything else, right? Like you're having your own personal haven at the expense of dealing with the consequences that we should reckon with together, like ecological damage, structural racism, all of the bad things in our world. Like you can't just shuttle those things away. But then again, I think it's interesting that even in like political fantasy, right? Like when I talk to friends who are very staunch communists or activists, sometimes their vision of what the world would be like on the other side of the revolution, whatever that means, right? I describe it as everybody eating salad in a field together. Like that's yes. that's the vision, right? And somehow we can't get away from this idea that has been instilled in us that is the better place. And I find that really interesting. But I agree. I mean, I think that, speaking of letters again and of touch, like I have started, even with the mail being so slow, I've started to mail a lot of friends. And even though it's not touching, there's something about like looking at the handwriting and opening the letter and seeing the torn notebook page and being like, someone's fingers have touched that is like really comforting to me. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that sociality is premised on being together. And even though I love digital space and all of the possibilities it opens up, it's never going to be a replacement for being in person, right? It's just a different form. And actually, one of the things that I like a lot about digitality is that there's so many problems. Like I love the little like, when things fritz out, or like someone is like, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, because that just kind of emphasizes to me the fact that this is not a utopic medium by any means. It's just as human with all of the flaws are just different.
It's a beautiful mess. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was also interesting, Jan, that you said you feel some kind of homelessness. And I heard that too in your talk, Trisha, that you said, so sometimes you feel like there is too much or not enough. So my question would be like, if you share this feeling, and I think it's a bit also what Jörg and I said in the beginning, that we don't really feel like we have one place where we belong or where we feel at home. What are your strategies, or what do you need? What would you say, where did you find home in the end? Or what do you build your home with now?
Susanne, you said in the introduction with Jörg, you talked about food and being at home. And also in Trisha's text, you talk about the rice cooking and the eel and how it's slippery and how it's like this muscle that slips out of your grandmother, right? It was your grandmother, grandmother's hand. And I had immediately, I saw myself as a child in the Spanish kitchen of my grandmother. And there was this moment when we had lobsters, like small, like river lobsters, like small ones. And they escaped somehow from the plastic bag that was standing on the kitchen table. And everybody, my grandmother, she was screaming like hell, like even as if they were mice. And my mom went into the kitchen and started to collect them and tried to like grasp them without being,
yeah.
And I think for me at least, there is no place on earth where I feel at home. Oh, that sounds so pathetic, but and also sad. But it's not sad for me. I think it's a big. For me. It's things like food, for example. When I make a tortilla de patata, I feel at home. Or also in my family, we always try to solve conflicts with food. So when I was on the phone with my mom and things started to get a little tense, then she asked me, so what did you have for dinner or for lunch today? And when I have Spanish food or also German food, like I love fermented sauerkraut and stuff like that, or Afghan food. My neighbor, she was my best friend. She was from Afghanistan, and they served also like rice dishes, delicious rice dishes. This is where I feel at home when I eat a tortilla de patata. This is home for me. Maybe it sounds a little wie sagt man, profan, superficial or something, but I think
No,
it's beautiful.
Not at all.
yeah.
I can be at home at least 3 times a day, so
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with that. I don't think that I can ever 100% be at home, in the sense that I can't ever fulfill all the necessities to be a part of each separate home that I have, right? That's how I feel. Like I'm always a little bit too white to be a Singaporean. I'm always a little too Singaporean to be American, but the moments that you're describing, Sheffy, like those moments of small communions or like modest intimacies with people from those different spaces can really feel like home. And I think is a kind of like more generative way to think about the connections we can make with each other in creating different kinds of homelands that are more like penetrable or generous or accessible to a wider group of people, right? And I think that food is a big part of that. I also do the same thing with my family, where it's like, if we're going to get in a fight, we're going to talk about food instead.
exchange recipes.
Yeah.
Well, I think
what you said about the revolution, like after the revolution, this is also, we are going to eat salad in a field.
but talking about food, I mean, it's like food is like part of of shaping an identity. What a family eats or drinks, like that can be completely different from your neighbors in the same village, for instance. It's like it shapes the whole identity of one family. And on the other hand, is like especially talking about food, is like if for instance, Ostfriesland, East Frisia is a region which is like very famous for drinking Assam tea, East Frisian tea. The people in this area, they drink much more black tea than in any other part of Germany. And the problem is, it doesn't taste the same if I drink the same East Frisian tea in Berlin, because it's the water that makes the tea special. And the water in East Frisia is very, it doesn't have, huh?
It's very soft. The water in
very
Berlin
soft, yeah, right. And you can't like have the same quality than in Berlin. So this is a kind of thing that you can only have when you're there somehow, as you can't take it with you. Then it would be a different thing. But then the third thing, thinking about food, is like when I talk about food with my siblings, it's like I'm vegan, or I'm a vegetarian for like 27 years now, or 30 years almost. So talking or having discussions on food is a part of my family, and it's always the same move. Like I'm blaming them for eating meat, and then they are like eating more meat just to provoke me, to say how tasteful it is and how healthy it is and how nice it is, and I'm wrong somehow. You are living in a big city and you don't eat meat, you almost don't drink alcohol, so what is
they call you a student, Jan. They always say it's like an insult.
They still call me a student all the time.
Yeah.
I
so
think
it's not only food is not only shaping identity, it also can be a kind of a cut or a kind of a needle in this family.
Yeah, it's fascinating how food really encapsulates those different intimacies, both like the large ideological ones, right? And also like the specifics of like your family dynamics. Speaking of vegans, I think like, my family had a very similar incident where my sister brought home a boyfriend that was vegan, and my parents were like, they were like, but of course, like, veganism encompasses so many things that my parents are afraid of in terms of a partner for my sister, or like his ability to fit into our family in a particular kind of way. So yeah, no, I feel that for sure.
Same in Spain, of course. I mean, it's food is always you can talk about food and talk about identity. It's and how you, Trisha, you it seems as if it's something, the topic of the moment, and the topic of you and yourself changing as a person, not you, but in general, all of us humans, not in a non-linear way, like maybe also sometimes in like this matryoshka way, like you get out of it, like in the spider way, or whatever way, but not in this linear way, that you change all the time. You write a letter, you are a different person, maybe it arrives 2 weeks later and something has happened and nothing doesn't mean. Yet this is also when you suddenly decide to become a vegetarian or something, that so that food is always connected with identity and with how we change as persons as well. And it sounds so not intellectual, the topic of food, but it is, and is also, it's not only that I could think and talk about food so much, but it's also so connected to literature and to storytelling. And I didn't want to say, when Suzanne asked me what is home, I didn't want to say books and the language of my home. This is what everybody expects. But of course, not stalking, but talking about food. I'm a food stalker, definitely. Talking about food is, of course, also talking about books. It's like providing the mind with food, even though this is also very such a cliche, but it is, for me at least, connected very much to food. All my Enid Blyton books from childhood have stains of the chocolate cake my mother used to make, so I can still find the little chocolate stains on the pages. So that is connected for me. And it feels like home. Eating a chocolate cake from my mom and reading a book, this is maybe home for me.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, like what you said. No, it's like this matryoshka is developing, but I think you can see also two other things in food. Like one thing, also like multi dimensions of identity. I had to think about that when you said that you feel at home with tortilla. So I think I would say I feel at home at two dishes. One is like Käsespätzle, a very typical Southern German dish, and the other would be Romes Sabzi, a typical Iranian dish. Like two totally different things. One is with rice, one is like thick German noodles with so much cheese. It has nothing in common, but they both feel like home for me.
Yeah.
And also I thought it was really interesting, when you said like the typical tea in East Frisia, like how it is also how nowadays we consider it a typical German tradition, but how it is also in connect with colonial history. Like
Yeah,
I cannot imagine the big tea fields of East Frisia 500 years ago.
Yeah.
The German climate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question. So also, when I listened to you, Trisha, you were talking about anti-Asian racism in the US, and Stefanie, you in your book, you're also talking about the story of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is also interconnected with your own story, like I said also in the beginning when I introduced you. So would you say in general, like with these ideas in the background, it is a bad thing to feel somehow homeless or not to have a strong connection to a home, like we said in this talk before? Or do you think it could also on the other side be really dangerous if people have a very strong connection to a place or a group they call home? And like you cited it, Trisha, before, in the most extreme case, they even start to be ready to kill or die for this idea of home.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. It's an important question. It's one that I struggle with all the time, right? I mean, even in terms of the discourse around anti-Asian racism in the US, I think that that's a really good example because you can really see how complex the issue is. It's not just a matter of, you know, there is this hatred towards Asians, which is already like a very large category. And we need to start distinguishing between, for example, like the wealthy cosmopolitan Chinese people who have always had global mobility, and then like, you know, say East or South Asian immigrants who have come here with next to nothing. Like those are distinctions that need to be made. And so I think that on the one hand, the concept of homeland is really important in making those distinctions, right? In sort of like not lumping everything together so that nuances of class, of ethnicity, those things can be a part of the conversation. And on the other hand, I do think it's really dangerous to have such a strong attachment to one's homeland that you start to see your group as, on the one hand, superior to everybody else, and on the other hand, that has suffered more than everybody else, right? Like I think that thinking about trauma in such a way that doesn't include the traumas of other people around you is like a really unproductive thing for global solidarities, right? And it's something that, yeah, you know, even within the Hong Kong protests, you know, which I have very strong feelings about, there are young protesters who are like very pro-Trump, for example, because they believe that the US is going to come in and instill some kind of democracy. And obviously to me, as someone who lives in the US, that seems so counterintuitive, but it's all based in a kind of like attachment to traditional notions of the state, I think. So I think that on the one hand, you know, we want to keep those attachments and intimacies on a very small level, and on the other hand, we need to make sure that like the kinds of nuances of how national identities have come to be formed, yeah, like that, those things need to be parsed out and thought about, and you know, that's a very difficult thing to do when you're trying to work collectively, I think. Yeah, it's something that I struggle with. That's what I would say.
For me now, it's been a while that I quit with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I was born into this religious group, so for me it was like growing up in a fictional in a parallel like in a fictional world. And once I started to think by myself when I grew up, I realized that it was a big lie. It was a little bit like the Truman Show. When once I saw this movie, I was like, okay, this is exactly how the psychological process of this of the protagonist of the role of Jim Carrey is exactly how I felt when I started to wake up somehow. And now it's been such a long time that there is a lot of space between that childhood and the present, but there is a reason for that my book takes place in Eastern Germany. Most part of it is takes place in post-Eastern Germany, so in the former GDR. When I talk to people who grew up in the GDR, I have a very strong connection with them, because they also lost somehow a country that is also maybe geographically still there, but not ideologically. It is also the like somehow Soviet communism is fiction. It turned into it's over. It's not there anymore, and there is something I share with those people. But what I think is much more interesting about this topic on homeland and Jehovah's Witnesses and small groups is also the other side, what Jan said about homelessness, about being lost in a place geographically, culturally, maybe in a maybe my mom, she came here with my father, and she came from a dictatorship. My grandfather was a Republican who spent 3 years in a concentration camp and couldn't work after being released in fascist Spain. She came here and she thought it's like the dream country. well, it wasn't. She had to face racism. She had to face hostility because she didn't speak perfect German, etc., etc. And one day, two Spanish Jehovah's Witnesses rang the bell. This is how she got into this cult. And this is something that I tried to investigate through writing this novel. How does this happen? And this is also the alarms. All my alarms ring every time I see them standing somewhere with the watchtower or with their publications. I always see them talking with people of color, obviously refugees, and then I think of my mom, and then I think of the structural and political problems we have that are still there. When it was in the 60s there. You were talking about Fassbinder, Trisha. He is one of the few filmmakers in Germany who dealt with all these problems with racism, and nothing has changed. And this is something that makes me feel homeless too, because it's so frustrating. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think a lot of things have changed since the 70s. I mean, especially in a social way, that, you know, women are much more into media, or, you know, into writing, and in the Öffentlichkeit, you know,
in the public space.
in the public space, and also, you know, people from other countries, and in Germany. It's not like, you know, that it couldn't be more. Obviously it can be more, and it should be more. But, you know, I think this the society in the 70s was much more influenced by the Nazi movement than it is now, because the generation is dead. And a lot of things have changed. If you watch like TV from the 70s, you see that women almost were only like you know, hosts for like advertising the next program.
Yeah, I disagree in terms of I was talking about racism. I disagree in that way. I think it's true that it's not possible anymore to say to be straightly racist, like on the streets or whatever, that people cannot say exactly what they were thinking anymore. But I don't think that the attitude in general has changed so much. We talk about it. Fortunately, we talk about it more because there are voices that are addressing things and criticizing things. But I think we have still a big racist problem, and that the society is as racist as it was in the 70s.
Yeah. I mean, I agree that the language and some attitudes about race have changed, right? But I mean, in the US too, I feel like with a state that has been built on principles of racism, even if like media discourse or like, you know, some kind of like surface attitudes among everybody has changed, the truth is that like the structural issues make sure that material conditions are still different for people of color, right? And so it's interesting that even though we can talk about it differently, like the truth is that people still are being brutalized by police, right? Still have less access to resources. Like those like very base level material conditions, I think, are what are really where racism lives. Right. And for me, the difference between discourse and those material conditions is something that I think a lot about. Right. For example, we can have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talk about, you know, different, like valuing different kinds of identities, but what is really happening at the ground level to make sure that the lives of those people significantly change? Not a lot. right? So I think that's like a point of interest for me, I guess. And it's like, you know what you were saying, Steffi, about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and how, you know, I do think that there's something about structural racism that means that material conditions of people's lives are really difficult, and so they're more susceptible to narratives that might turn them to certain different kinds of ideologies, right? Like, for example, a lot of there are Asian Trump supporters, you know, there are Latino Trump supporters, but when you talk to those people, a lot of them turn to Bernie in the 2020 elections, because what's happening is that all they want is like a good education. They want to be able to feed their families, right? It's not about these like wider discourses of identity that they care about. It's about having a sense of belonging through those very material things. And I think that is something that politics should really think about. Not that I will have any effect on politics in my thinking about this, but yeah, I think about that a lot, that those are the routes through which people turn to.
I agree with you. Just getting back to what Jan said, I want to clarify what I mean when I talk about parallels between the 70s and now, or similarities or things that haven't changed. What I'm talking about when I talk about this is to see refugees or political or economical or whatever you call them coming to Germany and seeking for help and seeking for protection and facing hostility and racism and facing not only different climate and all these things that come with when you change from one place to another, you have a totally different geographical and cultural and food, everything is different, but that you also still face this, like, you're not welcome, even though we have all these people wearing the stickers, refugees welcome. I guess this is also something that has changed, that there are institutions beyond the church and there are people and groups try to help, but the society in general is very hostile towards people who are so not called who are called not a biological German, Biodeutsche. And this is something that I just experienced while I was writing the novel, that this is something that my mother was facing, and that is the reason why she turned to a very cosmopolitan religious group. The Jehovah's Witnesses are very diverse and very they had congregations in all kinds of languages, and people from we had an Francophone community, and my mom, sometimes she went there when she wanted to talk in French, and so she could experience this utopia she was dreaming that Germany was, but only within the Jehovah's Witness group. And this is something that is very sad, I think, and still is. And this is, of course, things have changed, Jan, but some things haven't changed.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting the point. And I mean, if you like look to the US, like 50% of the voters are still voting for Trump. Or in Germany, you have like this big AfD party who have like more than 10%, and in some areas have like more than 50% of the voters in some villages or cities. So I think I don't want to deny that fact that racism is still very powerful, and it's like within all of us, like a virus. The thing is, like, talking about homelessness or home or phantom homeland. Well, you know, it's like, for me, leaving this countryside, one reason was that there was this kind of tyranny of normality. You have to be like they wanted you to be. You have to be straight, you have to eat meat, and you have to, it's better for you not to have a good education. So everyone has to be on a same level somehow. And that's why I left this place, because I thought the world is like more than that, or should be more than that. So I was like moving to my own utopia, if you want to say so. And I think, you know, what you said about your mother, Steffi, moving to Germany is finding a new home. And that's always like, or Trisha moving to the US, or, you know, moving within a country or a nation, you know, from a village to the city, is like the same longing for something, to live a better life or a different life. And yeah, I mean, that's a cliche now, but writing books is a way to find a new home, and a mobile home somehow, you know, to carry these stories with you wherever you go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all your interesting insights. I have bad news. We're already getting towards the end. So I have a very short last question for you. So, like you said now, Jan, writing and being an author can be your mobile home. But I would be interested, like, do you have one thing? We talked about food, but I think there's a lot of more things which can be home. Do you have like one thing you're carrying around from flat to flat you would always take with you because it finds home for you? What is that is obviously my question.
Well, I'm not very, I have to say, there are things, sentimental things. I have actually I did the Marie Kondo 2 years ago, and I have the sentimental box.
Did you build the whole mountain with all the things and you
Yeah,
looked at
I
each
did it.
thing?
When I do
Wow,
things,
I'm
I do them
impressed.
right.
Me too.
So I also have the sentimental box, but actually my sentimental box is in the basement, and I don't even know what's inside. But I put the things there that have no meaning, just for me. I think there is nothing there. There is nothing that I as a material thing that I consider as my home. No.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, I love objects in general. I think that, you know, I'm very attached to them. They hold a lot of meaning, like Steffi said, but maybe the attachment is more important than the object, right? So like all I could think about was my friends, which sounds really sentimental and cliched, but friendship is like a drug. I think that people who know me who really see me and know me, I think that is the most valuable thing about friendship. And so I have lots of objects, you know, I have like locks of my friend's hair all over my bedroom, but you know, those are just the things. And what I feel, where I feel home is where I can be seen fully, in all of the ugly parts too. And I think that I find that mostly in friendship. So yeah, that would be the one thing that I'm attached to.
Oh.
Who's
that?
That's my thing that, you know, is always with me. It's like Bello.
Bello.
He's with me
Hi,
for like
Bello.
45 years now. Yeah. And
That's
still there.
beautiful. He still
Always
looks
there.
pretty well for 35 years.
Yeah,
I was gonna
Yes,
say,
wow.
Did
Yeah,
you
I know.
restaurate him, or
Pardon?
did you restaurate him? Like, did you restore the
No. The thing is, I'm giving him not enough love. I'm not hugging him as I should. You know.
Well, then if you gave some straight answers while you were talking, I have to come back then to food, and I think it would be a bottle of olive oil that I could cook with, and if I smell the olive oil, it's like home. Also, it's a good cream, you know, you can do a lot of things with it. So
Also works in
it's
hair.
medicine, it's food, it's perfume.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trisha, Stefanie, and Jan, that you've been here with us, and thank you for
Thank
the very
you.
interesting talk. Yeah, So for now, today is over, but before we have the official end, I will hand over back to Jörg. So thank you all for being here and for this really nice talk. Have a good
Thank you
evening.
so
Bye.
much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
guys. It was
Bye.
great.
Bye-bye.